We can now bring in Agnes Callamard, Secretary General of Amnesty International. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, you've called on the French president to raise human rights with MBS. Do you think that Emmanuel Macron will do just that?
All we can do is ask for it. I mean, President Macron has been rehabilitating MBS on the international scene for several years now, frankly, with very little result in terms of human rights or indeed MBS commitment to a more general democratic agenda. But we need to keep demanding that the right thing be done. MBS is coming at a time when Saudi Arabia is about to execute 7 persons who were children at the time of their alleged crimes. And I say alleged crimes because based on the information we have gathered, those are not crimes, and they certainly should not lead to an execution. So President Macron, at the very least, must ensure that those 7 young men are not executed this week, next week, or ever.
Is it fair to only blame Emmanuel Macron for rehabilitating MBS's image? Because when Joe Biden was running to become US president, he promised to turn MBS into a pariah. He didn't really succeed in doing that. In fact, last year, Joe Biden was in Saudi Arabia fist bumping MBS.
Absolutely. And we and I personally, in fact, raise the alarm about it. Absolutely. At least President Macron never really tried to suggest that he will make a pariah of MBS, unlike indeed the US president, who has done a 360 degrees shift. I should add as well that he did so in July during his visit in order to bring MBS to support the Western position against Russia, and he completely failed. In the aftermath of that visit, MBS went on to build a closer relationship with Russia, as he has done with China over the last few months. So I think the lesson is there for all of those leaders, Western leaders, to get. You know, MBS will only follow what he believes is good for himself and for his vision of Saudi Arabia. And yet we're prepared to sell at a very cheap level our values and our principles, and there is absolutely nothing to be gained in exchange, nothing.
But Agnes Callamard, should we not have a more pragmatic approach when dealing with Saudi Arabia, given the oil that the country is exporting and that we haven't shifted to, renewable energy resources, to getting all our energy from those renewable energy resources?
Look, we've heard about pragmatism for a very long time. Let me say 2 things. The first one regarding the oil and the period we live in. I mean, this is climate change. We committed in Paris, as a matter of fact, to limit the increase of temperature vis-à-vis the glacial period to 1.5 degrees. According to the recent data, we're moving towards 2.5, and there are even a prognosis leading us to 4 degrees. What does that mean? A very large part of the world will be inhabitable at the rate we are going. That is what we are offering to the future generation whenever we are prepared to make deals with the individuals whose productions, whose main industry is killing the planet. So yes, of course, it's pragmatic. It's pragmatic for what? For 2023? It's certainly not pragmatic for 2050. And we are talking, this is not far away. It's one generation.
Agnes Callamard, stay with us, because one of the things Saudi Arabia is trying to do is to rebrand itself and diversify from oil, something we're discussing right now. The kingdom is building a futuristic city, Neom. It's opening its doors to international filmmakers. Take a look.
A few studios and these bungalows in the sand. The regime wants to attract film crews from all over the world to this desert. Saudi Arabia promises to pay 40% of the budget of each shooting without taxes. NEOM will be a kingdom within the kingdom, with its own laws different from the rest of the country. The communication operation is carried out by foreign consultants recruited at great expense.
Watch out. Very good. That's impressive. Watch out.
The Australian Wayne Borg came to the Jeddah Festival to praise the latest equipment from NEOM.
Our in-state media hub will be 1 million square metres. We'll have between 45 and 50 sound stages, tenancy space, gaming studios, industry learning facilities, as well as incubation and startup space. It'll be the world's first truly integrated media hub.
But beyond the PR, impossible to know more. Tell us more about this semi-autonomous status and what it entails.
Well, that'll be... Can I talk about this? What am I
We can talk about the laws and regulations, then can't give specifics.
Yeah, so...
They're coming a little bit later on.
So NEOM will have its own founding laws and regulations so that we're able to compete to attract the world's best talent and industry, to further the ambitions we have of creating a real sort of powerhouse and dynamic economic and social centre.
The talking points are nebulous, but the calculation is simple. Welcoming film crews to work in NEOM means injecting millions of dollars into the local economy.
I'd like to bring in Agnes Callamard, Secretary General of Amnesty International, in once again. Agnes Callamard, you heard there in that report filmmaking, but we also have Riyadh trying to lure in sports personalities from the world of, football, golf, what have you. How does the world compete with Riyadh's deep pockets?
You compete with your values, my dear. You compete with the future. That future that is human rights centered, a future that recognizes equality between people, between men and women, between religion, a future that is not based on money coming from oil, a future that, that seeks to create a little bit more partnership and equality, not a future where you can buy people. That's a future, that's how we compete. That's how we should compete. The MBS, of course, always has had access to the millions, the billions from the oil industry. But is this the world we want to create? Is this a world we want to hand over to the next generation? Is this the future system we have in mind?
But what do you say? What do you say to the Cristiano Ronaldos and the Karim Benzemas who've gone and signed up with Saudi teams?
Shame on you! Of all people around the world, you are the least who should be selling yourself. You have such, privilege, such amount of money, and what do? Looking for more, selling yourself to this murderous king. To this man who is pretending that he's bringing equality to men and women in his country, the man who currently right now has put in for execution 7 young men whose main crime was to be Shia in a country that is dominated by the Sunni religion. Shame on you.
Agnes Callamard, we're going to have Emmanuel Macron, who's potentially going to try and sway MBS today on Riyadh's position on Ukraine. Shouldn't the international community try and get Riyadh to potentially use its influence to other things like Afghanistan and the situation with the Taliban, which has left a large chunk of the population in dire straits?
Well, that will be one option, or indeed, on China and the Xinjiang situation, the Uyghur religious minority, Muslim minority, they have said nothing. MBS has said nothing for them and their oppression, which amounts to crimes against humanity. So yes, of course, we should call on MBS to act internationally in a way that is responsible, in a way that could be adding to a value system, a value-based system. I'm not holding my breath, but at least it's certainly worth asking.
Agnes Callamard, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.